Live and live. I think I'm live and live. Live and live. Live on my hi Instagram, hi Facebook. Sorry, my eyes are going to go back and forth a little bit. Because, super profesh over here. Got my 2 devices set up. 2 devices. Woo, so professional. Yeah, this weekend, I'm gonna get my shite together and I'm gonna get a broadcasting service that will allow me to go live simultaneously. I mean, whoa, brand new technology, right? Live simultaneously to several different platforms. So won't that be amazing? And then I won't have to be like looking back and forth between 2 cameras, which fine. It's fine. Also, you should see my setup right now. It's so precarious. like my iPad, and then I've got my phone on top of it, and it's very precarious. Okay, friends, here is something that I wanted to talk a little bit about this morning because it came up yesterday in a session I was doing with a voice teacher. And it really ties in really well with the work that I'm doing this month, working to talk about neurodivergent students and working with neurodivergent singers in the voice studio. And so I have a class coming up about that, which next week, a 90-minute class, which is sort of like a lecture style class where we just sort of unpack what kinds of behaviors go with what kinds of brains and what's happening in the brain when you kind of witness this behavior, and how to work really intentionally to have to have an inclusive voice studio, and how that will affect all of your voice students, not just and the learning of all of your voice students, not just the folks who may be neurodivergent. So that's next week, and then the week after that, I'm doing a Voice Ped practicum, so 2-week intensive, very few voice teachers involved, like a small cohort, and where we talk about tips and tools, such as the one that we're going to talk about today, but in a really in-depth manner, and then we work it out, we apply. So that's like a minimum of 4-hour commitment per week in that time frame, but most folks actually end up doing solid 5 to 10 hours. So it's a solid chunk of learning and application. And this month's practicum is about working with neurodivergent folks in the voice studio. And at the same time, and this always happens when I'm talking to folks about neurodivergence and neurodiversity, is the voice teachers that I'm talking to are like, that seems really familiar, and I feel like maybe that thing that you're talking about doing with my voice students, I should maybe also do for myself. Interesting. So that always happens, and that every time, the last time I did the working with neurodivergent voices in the voice studio, the majority of the feedback from the voice teachers who did that class was, oh wow, I recognized a lot there in what you were saying, and I understand a lot about what I went through as a child and as a teenager, and now I see that, why these things are happening. There are some things that are falling into place in terms of how my own brain works. So that's, just keep that in mind, but that's coming up next week, and then the following week is a practicum. So here's the thing that came up yesterday that I wanted to talk about today. I was working with a voice teacher yesterday, and we were talking about working with one of her students, or one of their students, who is a slow auditory processor, so who has a processing disorder, or a processing difference, auditory processing difference, which means that when if we have that, it means that when we hear something that has spoken words, oh, Diana, well, we'll talk. When we have spoken words, we have challenges in order to be able to process and parse out what those words actually mean and then to actually act on those words. So this teacher was talking about working with a student who it took 3 or 4 times of the teacher saying to the student, we're going to work on this piece on page blah, blah, blah. We're going to work on this piece on page blah, blah, blah. Like it took 3 or 4 repetitions of that for the student to be able to process the information and figure out what we're doing next and then act on that information. And that's just the way their brain works at this stage. And this is quite a common neurodivergence actually it's quite a commonly occurring, and auditory processing actually doesn't develop to its full extent in sort of neurotypical folks. It doesn't actually develop until we're in our like mid to late teens. So if you're a toddler, or if you're if your child at home is saying to you, what, huh, what, after every time you ask them to do something, it may not be that they can't hear you. It may just be that they're still processing what you actually asked them to do. So we were talking about that, and the voice teacher was feeling very, very guilty because this kind of work in the studio was making her so frustrated. So she was feeling so guilty about it. She was like, I know this is just a processing difference, and I understand why, and I feel, and it's so frustrating for me because this teacher is a super fast processor. And so she was like, for the love, can we move on with this? And what she was resorting to was to, go scroll on Instagram, or like look at emails or whatever, right? She was looking because it was so slow. And that is something that I want to address. Friends, if your brain needs more dopamine than it is getting in a voice lesson when you are teaching, you can do something about that. Just recognize it. Say, hey, my brain needs more dopamine. I keep trying to scroll while I'm teaching these particular students because they're not necessarily processing as fast as I would like them to. So I need to and I'm getting bored and annoyed and frustrated and mad at myself and feel guilty because I just want to scroll through this lesson. Recognize that. That's fine. This teacher I was working with has an ADHD diagnosis, and part of an ADHD diagnosis, and part of the reason we think that ADHD happens the way it does in the brain, or affects the brain the way it does, and our behavior the way it does, is that there's something going on with our dopamine receptors, and it may be that the dopamine receptors are functioning way too well. In other words, they need more dopamine than a neurotypical brain needs, or that they're not functioning as well as they should be. So they're kind of not receiving the dopamine in the way that a neurotypical brain. That's all a little bit beyond me. All I know is that we're not getting the dopamine we need. And so we're resorting to, or we're going to the things that we know will give us that dopamine hit to keep our brains going and keep us happy. So this can result in the voice studio as a neurodivergent teacher. This can result in the voice studio in us looking for ways to get that dopamine hit while we're teaching. So that's fine. Recognize that that's what's happening in your brain. Every time I want to scroll in a lesson, say to yourself, you know what? I need a dopamine hit here. So then give yourself some really great ways to get a dopamine hit in a lesson, especially when we're teaching online right now. It's so easy to be able to do things that are going to give us that dopamine hit without distracting from the lesson and without distracting from the singer. So I want to be clear, there are a couple different ways to get a dopamine hit. And the way that is not going to work well for your brain is the one that drives your attention away, right? That gives you that makes you shift attention. Something like checking emails, something like scrolling Instagram, or looking at your Facebook, or looking at your messages or your texts. Anything that makes your brain go from what I'm thinking here to what I'm thinking here, that's not going to be useful. And that is going to give you a little dopamine hit, yay, but it's going to take away your attention, right? And that's exhausting for the brain. So that's not great. That kind of attention switching, not great. But when you feel like you want to do that, here are some other ways that you can get that dopamine hit without the attention shift. You can have a Rubik's Cube under the screen. You might not know, I might have a Rubik's Cube right here under my screen. I don't, but I could, and you might not even know it. And I can teach you your whole lesson and and be creating a Rubik's Cube with my hands under the screen while I'm teaching your lesson. And that does not draw my attention the same way that that checking Facebook does, but it also still gives me that dopamine hit. Other ways, have a fidget spinner. Friends, there's nothing wrong with having some fidget spinners on your piano for your students and for you. There's nothing wrong with that. Feel free, get some fidget spinners in there. Have a notepad there where you can scroll and doodle and draw things, make lists, whatever you want to do. Have a notepad on your piano. Have one of those scratch pads. You know those scratch pads where it's all black and then you what is it? Like you scratch it and then like the picture comes out as you scratch it. Those are immensely satisfying. Well, for me anyway, like so deeply satisfying, and do not require you to have that attention shift in the same way, but give you a great dopamine hit. Fantastic. Yeah, a fidget ring. Yes. There are so many, like, why do you think I like big rings and lots of jewelry? There are some things I can fidget with. Have just a good old fashioned coloring book, an adult coloring book. And rather than having the, like, oh, I'm going to color this green, just pick one color per lesson or something like that. And only color with the blue that lesson or something along those lines. I'm sure there are other things that would be useful, but those are some of the things that we came up with yesterday when I was working with the voice teacher that I was working with, to just give yourself a break. So no guilt, okay, friends? No guilt when you're teaching and your instinct is to want to scroll, or your instinct is to want to check your emails or to, look at Messenger or whatever. Recognize that for what it is. Your brain needs a dopamine hit, and it's not getting it from what you're doing right now. And that's fine. Totally fine. No guilt. Give your brain the dopamine hit in a way that is gonna allow you to stay focused in the lesson and allow you to stay present in the lesson. So I am truly not recommending that you leave, that you are not present in the lesson. Please stay present in the lesson, but do it in a way where you're still, where you're taking care of your brain and taking care of the way that your brain works. Yeah, recognize, all good, and we all need a dopamine hit at some time or another, even if we don't have a diagnosis, or we may not even have a neurodivergence. We all need a little dopamine hit sometimes. So sometimes something like that is just what you need, right? So if you have other thoughts on ways that you can get that dopamine hit in, I think I also teach using a wiggle cushion on my piano bench. And nowadays, and that's for my back as well, like it really helps my back, but also while I'm waiting for you to sing that song, I'm wiggling on my wiggle cushion. And yeah, I might look a little weird, but whatever, I don't care. On my wiggle cushion. Or right now, I'm also, because of the way that I have my studio set up, I'm also able to teach standing up or sitting down. So lots of standing up, sitting down, standing up, sitting down, standing up, sitting down. I just like get lots of movement in. That can be a way to feed the brain as well. But I would love to hear if you have some other thoughts as well. So if you've come up with some things that work for you as well, that do not involve scrolling or checking emails. And by the way, turn off the notifications, right? While you're teaching, just turn off those notifications. The notifications will take an attentional shift, right? They'll take them right over. Yes, exactly. No judgment. Just recognize that this is something your brain needs. Yeah. So take off the notifications. I've done a live on that before. Take off the notifications, because those notifications will give you an attentional shift. They also give you a little dopamine hit. Not gonna lie, but they will give you an attentional shift that you don't want. So figure it out. We can do this. All right. That's my little jump in for today. I may come in real regularly over the next week or so, just to do some little hits like this, just for good times. So we'll see. We'll see. Great. I'm gonna turn this